The Wyoming wind cut like a blade across the high plains as Cornelius "Corny" Fitzgerald limped through the tall grass, his right leg dragging behind him, his once fine clothes torn and bloodied. At 58, the former railroad executive had built 3 major lines across the frontier, connected countless towns to civilization, and spent 30 years bringing progress to the untamed West. But he'd never expected to be crippled and left for dead by his own board of directors, betrayed for the crime of refusing to build through a sacred Lakota burial ground. The sun beat down mercilessly, each step sending shards of pain through his shattered leg. Sweat mingled with dried blood on his brow as he squinted at the horizon, searching for any sign of shelter. His pocket watch, a gold timepiece given to him by President Grant himself after completing the Denver line, had been smashed during the beating, its hands frozen at 2:17, the exact moment his old life had ended. "You're too sentimental for modern business, Fitzgerald," Chairman Aldrich had sneered as his hired thugs worked Corny over with iron bars and sledgehammers. "This railroad's got no use for executives who can't tell the difference between progress and Indian superstition." Corny could still see Aldrich's face, that perfectly trimmed Van Dyke beard, those cold blue eyes that never warmed even when he smiled, the expensive silk cravat that probably cost more than most railroad workers made in a month. The man had built his fortune on other people's labor while never laying a single rail himself. The progress had been Aldrich's plan to run the new spur line directly through the ancient burial ground, saving the company $50,000 and 3 months of construction time. When Corny discovered the site's significance and insisted on rerouting the line, Aldrich had decided that a tragic accident would solve his problem permanently. Should have stuck to building bridges instead of building character. Aldrich had laughed as they loaded Corny onto a handcar and sent it rolling toward the wilderness. "Maybe the savages will appreciate your respect for their dead bones." The memory of those words fueled Corny's determination to survive, even as his body screamed for surrender. He'd spent decades believing in the railroad's mission, connecting communities, building the nation's future, only to discover that for men like Aldrich, it had never been about progress at all. Just profit, at any cost. Now Corny crawled through the buffalo grass and sage, his shattered leg leaving a trail of blood behind him, his vision blurred from the beating and the merciless sun. Each breath felt like inhaling fire, his cracked ribs protesting every movement. In the distance, he spotted a weathered building beside a creek, the first sign of civilization he'd seen since the handcar had finally derailed miles from anywhere. Hope surged through him, providing a final burst of energy. The building wavered in his vision like a mirage, seeming to retreat with each painful step forward. Corny had seen men die of exposure on the plains before, their bodies found days later, faces frozen in expressions of desperate longing. He refused to become another cautionary tale. The trading post sat at the confluence of 2 cattle trails, a place where drovers and travelers could rest their stock and themselves before tackling the long push to market. Its weathered boards had been bleached silver by years of sun and wind, the roof patched in places with mismatched shingles. A hand-painted sign, its letters faded but still legible, proclaimed Sullivan's Trading Post, fair deals for all peoples. Corny collapsed on the wooden steps, his blood pooling on the sun-bleached planks. The world spun around him as consciousness began to slip away. He managed to raise one hand and pound weakly on the door, unsure if the sound was even audible over the constant Wyoming wind. The door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-40s, her black hair streaked with silver, her weathered face marking her as someone who'd spent years under the prairie sun. She wore practical frontier clothes, a simple blouse and skirt of sturdy cotton, with a leather vest that bore the marks of hard use, and moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned that survival depended on making every action count. "Sweet Marian Joseph," she breathed in a thick Irish accent, taking in Corny's condition. Her green eyes widened with shock, then narrowed with determination. "What in God's name happened to you?" "Railroad. Board." Corny gasped through swollen lips, each word a struggle. "Tried to kill me." The woman, he'd later learn her name was Moira Mo Sullivan, helped him inside without hesitation, her strong arms supporting his broken body with surprising gentleness. Her trading post was well organized and surprisingly prosperous, with goods ranging from basic supplies to fine Irish whiskey and imported fabrics. The walls were lined with shelves containing everything from ammunition to medicine, while bundles of dried herbs hung from the rafters, filling the air with a complex mixture of scents. "Your own people did this to your leg?" she asked, examining the damage with hands that moved with surprising gentleness. Her fingers probed the injury with the confidence of someone who'd dealt with frontier injuries before. "Caught them. Desecrating sacred ground. Didn't appreciate my conscience." Corny's voice was barely a whisper now, his strength fading rapidly. Mo's green eyes hardened with recognition. She'd seen this kind of beating before, the methodical brutality of men who believed profit justified any cruelty. "Bastards," she muttered, reaching for a bottle of whiskey. "Left you for the wolves, did they?" She poured a measure of the amber liquid into a cup and helped him drink it, the alcohol burning a path down his throat and providing momentary relief from the pain. "I've seen what happens when men decide money matters more than decency," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "My husband and I came west to escape that kind of thinking." For a month, Corny drifted between consciousness and fever, while Mo tended his wounds with a mixture of frontier medicine and old country remedies her grandmother had taught her. She cleaned his injuries with whiskey and herbal poultices, set his broken bones as best she could, and fought the infection that threatened to claim his life with a stubborn determination that matched the harshness of the land itself. His leg would never be right again. The bones had been too badly shattered, but she managed to save it from amputation. During his more lucid moments, Corny would watch her move around the trading post, handling everything from inventory to negotiations with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to rely entirely on herself. When Corny finally sat up clear-headed, the fever broken at last, he found Mo negotiating with a group of Lakota traders, conducting business in a mixture of English, Lakota, and sign language. She handled the transaction with the respect and fairness that had made her trading post a neutral ground where all peoples could deal safely. "You speak Lakota," he observed, watching her work from his pallet near the stone fireplace. The realization surprised him. Few white settlers bothered to learn native languages, preferring to force Indians to speak English or use interpreters. "I speak whatever keeps the peace," Mo replied, counting the buffalo hides she'd received for a shipment of blankets. Her fingers moved quickly, assessing the quality of each hide with practiced ease. "Out here, you learn to respect your neighbors, or you don't survive long." She poured him a cup of strong coffee, adding a splash of whiskey for medicinal purposes, and sat beside him on a rough-hewn bench. "Most folks around here think I'm peculiar for trading with Indians," she admitted. "But their money spends just as well as anyone else's, and they're a sight more honest than most of the cattle barons who come through." Her story emerged slowly over the following days as Corny regained his strength. Mo had come west with her husband after the Irish potato famine, seeking land and opportunity in the Wyoming Territory. The memory of starvation in Ireland had driven them to build something secure, something that couldn't be taken away by landlords or blighted crops. They'd built a successful ranch until a harsh winter killed their cattle and debt forced them to sell everything. Her husband had died of a broken heart, leaving Mo to survive with nothing but her wits and her grandmother's trading instincts. "Men think an Irish widow can't run a business like this," she explained, organizing her inventory with military precision. "They're wrong. We understand value better than most. We've had to fight for every penny we've ever earned." She'd turned the small trading post into a vital way station, offering fair prices and honest dealings to everyone regardless of race or background. In a territory where tensions between settlers and natives frequently erupted into violence, Mo's establishment had become neutral ground, respected by all sides. Corny told her about Aldrich's conspiracy, the desecrated burial ground, the years of honest service repaid with treachery. He described how he discovered the burial site during a survey, recognizing its significance from the stone markers and offerings left by the Lakota people. When he'd brought his concerns to the board, Suggesting a route that would preserve the sacred ground while only adding minimal cost, Aldrich had seemed receptive, until the moment he'd ordered his men to teach Fitzgerald about progress. Mo listened without judgment, occasionally nodding as if she'd heard similar stories before. Her hands remained busy as she spoke, mending harnesses or sorting inventory, her practical nature never allowing for idle moments. "This Chairman Aldrich," she said finally, "he thinks money gives him the right to trample on sacred things? He thinks I'm a fool for believing in honor over profit. Too old-fashioned to understand that business is about taking what you can get." Corny's voice held a mixture of bitterness and resignation. "Maybe he's right. The world's changing, and men like me are being left behind. Maybe he's right about one thing," Mo said, her tone thoughtful. "Maybe the old way of doing business is finished. Question is, what are you going to build to replace it?" The question lingered between them, challenging Corny to look beyond his injuries and betrayal toward something new. For 30 years, he'd defined himself by the railroads he built, the towns he connected, the empire of steel and steam he'd helped create. Now, crippled and discarded, what purpose remained? Their partnership began when a dispute arose between cattle drovers and Lakota hunters over grazing rights, threatening to explode into violence that would shut down the vital trade routes that kept Mo's business alive. The cattlemen claimed exclusive rights to water sources that the Lakota had used for generations, while the Lakota insisted that the land belonged to everyone and couldn't be owned. Corny's knowledge of surveying and contract law, combined with his newfound respect for Indian rights, allowed them to mediate a solution that satisfied both parties. He drew up maps showing alternative water sources and grazing areas, creating a schedule that allowed both groups to access what they needed without conflict. "You still know your business," Mo observed as they watched the cattle move peacefully through Lakota hunting grounds under a negotiated agreement. The sunset painted the prairie in gold and crimson, turning the scene into something almost sacred. "No engineering, no logistics, no how to build things that last," Corny replied, leaning heavily on the walking stick Mo had carved for him from a piece of lightning-struck oak. "Out here, that's still worth something." The stick had become an extension of himself, its polished surface worn smooth where his hand gripped it. Mo had insisted on making it herself, refusing his offers to pay for a manufactured cane from the next supply shipment. "A man should have something made just for him," she'd said, working the wood with patient skill. "Something that fits his hand alone." Word spread through the Wyoming Territory about the trading post at Broken Wheel, where Mo Sullivan and the crippled railroad man could resolve disputes that had stumped territorial authorities for years. Ranchers and Indians alike sought their counsel, drawn by their reputation for fairness and practical solutions. They developed a reputation for fairness that extended from the Powder River to the Colorado border. Corny's engineering skills proved valuable beyond mediation. He designed irrigation systems that helped both settlers and natives survive drought years, and created maps that clearly delineated hunting grounds and cattle trails to prevent accidental trespassing. More importantly, they found in each other something they'd both thought lost: companionship, respect, and the slow-burning warmth of mature love built on shared struggles and mutual understanding. Neither spoke of it directly, but it grew between them like prairie grass after spring rains, natural and inevitable. The confrontation with Chairman Aldrich came 18 months later. He arrived on a special train with territorial officials and forged documents, claiming Corny was mentally incompetent due to his injuries and needed to be placed under company care. The real reason was clear. Corny's work with the Lakota had revealed more sacred sites along Aldrich's planned route, threatening to derail his expansion plans. "There's the old cripple," Aldrich announced, pointing at his former executive. "Living in squalor with some Irish peasant, probably doesn't even remember how to read a blueprint anymore." Corny stepped out of the trading post, no longer the broken man Aldrich had left for dead. Hard work and purpose had strengthened his body, while finding his true calling had restored his spirit. His beard had grown in fully white, giving him the appearance of a frontier patriarch rather than a disgraced executive. He walked with a pronounced limp and needed his stick, but his mind was sharp and his voice strong. "Aldrich," he said calmly, "you're looking prosperous. The grave-robbing business treating you well?" The chairman's face flushed with anger. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm here on official railroad business." He gestured to the territorial officials, flanking him, men whose expressions suggested they'd been well paid for their cooperation. "These gentlemen have papers declaring you mentally unfit after your unfortunate accident. The company's generously offering to care for you in a private sanitarium." "Official?" Mo stepped out beside Corny, a shotgun cradled in her arms. The weapon wasn't pointed at anyone yet, but her meaning was clear. "Funny thing about that, I sent some telegrams to friends in Washington and Chicago. Seems the federal government's been looking into your business practices." Aldrich's confidence wavered as he realized they'd been building a case against him for months. Mo's connections throughout the trading network had provided access to records and witnesses that painted a clear picture of systematic corruption and cultural destruction. Former employees had come forward with stories of bribery, intimidation, and worse. "This is a setup," Aldrich sputtered, his hand moving toward his gun. The territorial officials exchanged nervous glances, suddenly unsure which side of this confrontation would prove safer for their careers. "No," came a new voice from the creek bank. "This is justice." Chief Red Cloud emerged from the willows with a dozen Lakota warriors, their faces painted for war. They'd been tracking Aldrich's movements since learning of his plans to desecrate more burial grounds. The chief's dignified bearing contrasted sharply with Aldrich's increasingly desperate demeanor. "You want to build on sacred ground?" Red Cloud called out in perfect English. "Build your own grave first." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Aldrich's men were outnumbered and outgunned, facing not just angry Indians, but federal marshals who'd been investigating the railroad's illegal activities. The marshals had arrived quietly on horseback, positioning themselves strategically around the trading post. "This isn't over," Aldrich snarled, backing toward his train. His hand still hovered near his pistol, but even he could see the futility of violence now. "Yes, it is," came another new voice. A federal judge stepped off the train's rear car, flanked by government investigators and several angry shareholders who'd learned about Aldrich's corruption. "Cornelius Fitzgerald, I presume? I've been looking forward to taking your deposition regarding certain irregularities in railroad land acquisitions." Aldrich's empire crumbled quickly once federal authorities began examining his books and interviewing witnesses. The investigation revealed not just desecration of Indian burial grounds, but systematic fraud, bribery of government officials, and dangerous corner-cutting that had resulted in several fatal accidents along his lines. The railroad was reorganized under new management that respected both environmental concerns and Indian rights, while Aldrich himself died in federal prison, still claiming he'd only been trying to build progress. His final days were spent in bitter isolation, abandoned by the same society figures who had once courted his favor and wealth. "Feel better?" Mo asked as they watched the train disappear toward the horizon, carrying away the last of the federal investigators. The case had taken months to build, requiring countless depositions and documentation, but justice had finally been served. "Feel useful," Corny replied, leaning on his walking stick. The wood had darkened with use and age, becoming as much a part of him as his own hands. "For the first time since they crippled me, I feel like I'm building something that matters." Their partnership deepened into something more profound than business or convenience. They expanded the trading post into a proper settlement that served the entire region, providing not just supplies and shelter, but mediation services for the complex disputes that arose when different cultures tried to share the same land. The small building where Mo had once nursed Corny back to health became the center of a growing community. They added a proper meeting hall where representatives from all sides could gather to resolve conflicts, a school that taught children from both settler and native families, and eventually a small church where a progressive young minister preached a gospel of tolerance and mutual respect. "We make quite a team," Mo observed one evening as they sat by the creek, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant reds and golds. The years had etched more lines into her face, but her eyes remained as bright and determined as ever. "We make a bridge," Corny corrected, taking her calloused hand in his scarred one. "The kind that connects different worlds instead of dividing them." At 59, Cornelius Fitzgerald was no longer the broken-down executive who'd been beaten and left for dead by corrupt colleagues. He was a peacemaker, a builder, and living proof that true progress meant lifting people up rather than tearing them down. The prairie that had nearly claimed his life had instead given him purpose, partnership, and the chance to use his skills for something greater than mere profit. His engineering knowledge now served to create irrigation systems that helped both settlers and natives survive the harsh Wyoming climate, while his understanding of contracts and law protected vulnerable communities from exploitation. And Moira Sullivan had found something she'd thought lost when her husband died. Not just love, but belonging with someone who saw her Irish heritage as strength rather than stigma, who understood that building something lasting required both business sense and the courage to stand up for what was right. Together, they'd carved out their own piece of the American dream in the windswept beauty of Wyoming, proving that sometimes the people society discards become the ones who build the most enduring peace. Their trading post became a landmark on the frontier, Broken Wheel Station, where honest dealing and cultural respect went hand in hand. The railroad still ran past their door, carrying passengers and freight across the expanding West. But now it ran on routes that honored both progress and tradition, built by people who understood that the strongest foundations are laid with respect for those who came before. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the prairie wind died down, Corny would stand at the edge of their settlement and look out across the vast landscape that had nearly killed him and instead given him new life. The broken wheel that had derailed his handcar still lay half buried in the tall grass several miles away, a reminder that sometimes the most important journeys begin when the old path ends.